Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Here.
Kurt?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Brandy? Here. Jay?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a full assembly here this evening for our special meeting. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, and that's amendment and approval of this evening's meeting agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the meeting as presented.
Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I'd like to add to the agenda the possible conversation about the Port and Harbor member appointment. Since we're all 7 of us are here tonight, maybe this would be a good time to at least talk about it or at least vote on it.
If someone wants to second that, that's fine, but in my opinion, on something like that, if we're going to vote on it, I think it should have been advertised 72 hours ahead of time, or at least noticed so the public knows of it. So that's my opinion. The Assembly can do what they'd like.
I'll second it for the sake of discussion.
Okay, Member Mucci would like to add the discussion and possible voting to appointment of the Harbor Board. Member Stanton Grager.
A question for the clerk, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Does the 72-hour rule apply since this is not new business? Since it's something it was an action item at the last meeting? If you could clarify for me.
To me, it's much more unfinished business. We have advertised that we got 4 letters of interest, and we've talked about it at one meeting. So in my mind, not advertising it before this meeting wouldn't be the end of the world, but it's up to the Assembly.
Roger. Thank you, Clerk Thompson. I appreciate it.
Is there any other proposed amendments to tonight's agenda? Member Strand.
I think we should keep it a discussion item, not an action item.
Another opinion of mine is special meetings should be for specific reasons, and you know before you have a special meeting what you're going to be discussing. And we could, the clerk and I talked about even having this on a special meeting agenda amendment or approval. I've never seen this happen in a special meeting before. So, but with that being said, is there any other discussion on the amendment? Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote on this, Debbie.
Okay.
See if they want to put that on the agenda there.
Clarification, are we voting to have it as a discussion item or an action item?
Well, how would you like to state your motion, Member Mucci? Because you mentioned discussion, then you said maybe we could vote on it. So for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to vote on it tonight since all 7 of us are here. I'm not quite sure when the next meeting is going to happen when the 7 of us are here. I could certainly call in on the meeting of the 21st, but since we're all here and I think we know all the members all the people who have applied for the position, it'd be interesting to see if we could pass that piece of Assembly business tonight.
So I guess if it's going to be an action item, in my opinion, it should be put on the agenda as the mayor's appointment to, like we would normally do, to the Harbor Board and go from there. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So are we sending those 4 letters to the Harbor Board for a recommendation, or we're just going to deal with it tonight?
I've never seen that happen before.
Okay, so we're just going to, Mr. Mayor, we're going to deal with it tonight.
We're going to vote?
We're going to vote if we're going to deal with it tonight. Please be recognized before I can see this getting confusing already. So is there any other discussion on this, putting this on as a mayor's appointment? Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes?
Nancy?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Brandy? No. Jay?
Yes.
Okay, it passes with a 4-3 vote. Put it under unfinished business, I guess, under E. And would you remind me when we get to that, Clerk, please?
Yes.
Any other amendments, or is everybody fine with the agenda as amended? All those in favor of moving forward as amended, say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move forward with the one amendment. Brings us to visitors' views related to the agenda. Any visitors in the audience with views related to items on this evening's agenda? Step to the microphone, state your name and who you represent, please.
Fellow Assembly members, thank you for having me. My name is Joe Bertignoli. I am representing myself. I'm a member of the Petersburg Municipal Employees Association, and on tonight's agenda, we have a motion to an item to unilaterally implement the last, best, and final offer that was supposedly given to the members of the Petersburg Municipal Employees. That's our contention that offer that you supposedly are voting on tonight is not what the last, best, and final was. It's being called a mediated settlement or mediated TA, but on that mediated TA there was written last, best, and final. And so that's basically, if there was truly a last, best, and final, it should be that one. Which is different than the one that was voted down pretty handedly in August. So I just want you to be aware of whatever you're voting on, and still, even at this point, you unilaterally implement it, still has to go to the Labor Relations Board for them to accept your implementation. You can't just implement it single-handedly, is what my belief is. Not that I wanted to get up here, but it's been a long time. The last time I was up here was when we had a contentious negotiating, but that was with, if everybody remembers, our buddy Scott Hahn, and it was not pretty back then, and it could be a lot prettier right now. I just want to say, quickly things here that the way I viewed this whole thing as it came down. I've been with the Borough for 20-some years. I'm just asking you, and because of my colleagues and that we have been subjected to a fairly hostile contract negotiations at the hands of John Hogue. I mean, it's as simple as that. His attitude and everything during negotiations, I've never seen anything quite like it in my life. I said Scott Hahn was tough to deal with, but he didn't know any better. John supposedly knows any better, and any time you'd go to somebody when you ask or put something on the table and their answer is not only no, but hell no, that is not very professional of a negotiator. And the hell no disposition ran through that whole negotiation. He basically tried bullying, and the tactics didn't work. Our lead negotiator, Joel Hill, he tried bullying him, and when he couldn't, he thought less of Joel and thought Joel was being hard to get along with. But Joel basically was stating what our members wanted him to state. He wasn't making that stuff up. It wasn't like he was driving for us. He was the one that was speaking for us. I don't believe that hell no disposition that was brought for us is what you folks at this table are representing as our Borough management. And I'm asking that you step forward, instead of going this route, step forward and get us back to the table. Get us back there and see if we can't work something out. I mean, in light of the Power and Light's recent rejection of their contract, it proves that we're just trying to remain kind of level in our playing ground and get some cost of living increases. We're not asking for the moon by any means. Because we are more than willing to step back to the table and sit down, and hopefully that if John is the negotiator, that he would be, a little bit more listening. He'll listen and talk and negotiate, as opposed to just well, he used the term bullying again, instead of just saying, this is it, this is no good. And I know he's marching with your guys' direction too, but that direction does not transfer over to the way he was treating us. And I said, no, that is not the way you guys would like to see it. I think you'd like to see a professional person in there negotiating for you, because he was speaking for you folks. And I said, we're willing to step up and make concessions.
Wrap it up, Joe. It's been...
Okay, and make concessions, but I said, I urge you to just be aware of that when you go to do your vote this evening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else in the audience with visitors' views related to items on this evening's agenda? Please step forward. Mr. Biot, you want to come and speak first, and then the gentleman behind you can be next? And I should have mentioned it before Mr. Burton even started. I'm going to limit you to 5 minutes. So, okay.
I'll keep it short.
Thank you.
Hi, Assembly members. My name is Blake Biot. I am representing myself. I currently work up at the water plant. I've been there for 6.5 years now. I kind of just want to touch base on kind of what Joe was going over there, but I just want to wrap it up. Excuse me. This is my first time being part of the negotiating team. I got asked to be on here and to deal with this contract. And at the time, I was really excited about it because I thought it was a good learning opportunity for me to see what actually goes on behind doors that a lot of people don't realize, or younger people like me that work for the city don't have any idea. I just want to say I've noticed a big lack of professionalism too, and it's made me feel uneasy about my future. I got this job planning on wanting a career. I'm born and raised here my whole life, and I'm worried about our current employees, their future, and younger people even than me that want to get opportunity to work for the city. And I just ask that you guys please listen to our opinions and take them to heart. We've tried really hard to be reasonable, and there's been, like Joe was saying, a lot of disrespect and a lot of rude comments back on the other side of the table, which to me is uncalled for. And like Joe was stating, I don't believe that's how you guys represent yourselves. And I'm not putting the blame on you by any means, but I just ask that you please take this very seriously for our employees, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Biot, for your testimony.
Did you get a chance to ask a question?
I don't know if it'd be a good idea to ask questions back and forth if we're still in union negotiations. I don't know, though. I'm not an attorney. Sir, would you like to testify?
I'm the notorious Joe Hill, APEA. Basically what I wanted to mention to you, I think there's some missing pieces of information that you, I'm thinking, have not been presented. One of them, you're taking an important vote tonight to make a unilateral decision. I would recommend not doing that tonight and putting it off for another meeting. We, as a union, have already, John may or may not have shared this with you, but we have already filed an unfair labor practice against the borough. And it's already been accepted by ALRA and noted, so there will be a date impending. So if you move forward, it's not a threat, it's just a matter of fact. If you move forward with a unilateral decision tonight, it'll put me in a position to file another unfair labor practice on that action. So my recommendation, not that we're buying time or anything, is don't put yourself in that position, nor the union. I really don't like doing the extra paperwork. So anyway, and as Joe stated, we're willing to come back to the table, meet you more than halfway. We've got some options that can break impasse. We haven't been given that opportunity. John went for the jugular a couple times. I'm not going to smack talk him other than he closed Debbie out of the room one time. closed door with himself, which one should never do as a negotiator. Should have somebody in there. Frankly, I'd like to see Steve at the table. I know he doesn't want to be at the table, but I think in one meeting, him and I could make a deal. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to testify or give a comment under visitors' views related to items on today's agenda? Okay, seeing no other interest. Is there any visitors in the audience tonight with views unrelated to items on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing...
Mr. Mayor, I do have a letter.
Oh, that's right, we have one letter. Thank you.
Yes. This is from Bill Tremblay. Excuse me. I am offering comments for a topic that is not on the agenda, specifically the letter to the Forest Service regarding the issues related to the report from the Washington office of the Forest Service and the poor performance by the Forest Service and the contractor in completing the required work for the Tonka stewardship contract. Someone stated at the last assembly meeting that they were not sure they wanted to get between the environmental group and the agency in this dispute. Make no mistake, this is an issue for our community regardless of whoever else wants to be involved. There is no dispute, as the Washington office report clearly identified poor timber harvest administration on the part of the agency and that the contractor didn't meet the requirements of the contract. As a consequence, a quantity of timber was not harvested that reduced the expected revenue that could have been used for projects benefiting the Petersburg community. The Petersburg Council and Assembly have supported the timber industry many times when asked. Why not hold the agency and timber contractors, I think he means, accountable when things go wrong? Our community lost projects that were specifically linked to benefiting wildlife, fisheries, recreation, and subsistence uses. If the stewardship contract was as bad as was indicated by the representative of the Alaska Foresters Association, then the company shouldn't have bid on the contract, something that responsible timber operators have done many times. If we don't learn how things are fixed to prevent these issues in the future, I question whether or not the Forest Service can manage future proposed management activities being discussed for Prince of Wales Island and the South Central Tongass area. I would also question why our Borough Assembly would support future timber actions at all. I support the multiple use resource objectives of the Forest Service. Timber contracts used to have a clause in them where a contractor would be penalized for failing to cut the timber under contract. At least ask why something like this isn't included in the stewardship contracts now being offered. Bill Tremblay.
Thank you for reading that, Debbie. So, is there any views from the audience unrelated to tonight's agenda? I'll ask one more time. Seeing no interest, we'll move to unfinished business. Planning for the future meeting ideas is the first topic. I'd entertain a motion to have the discussion on that planning. So, is there a second? Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Castro. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, this is on the agenda because we're going to be talking about the budget shortly after that. And I was just curious if there's anything on those several pages that Steve of the city staff put together that we might want to include on some of the discussions about either increasing or decreasing the city budget. A lot of people spent a few hours up here in the assembly chambers talking about things they like to see done differently, whether it's the library being open or the way garbage is picked up, this, that, and the other. And I was just curious, is there anything in these several pages of suggestions that we might want to include in the budget process?
Any other discussion? Go ahead,
Mr. Mayor.
I had a discussion with the manager about this today, and just to see what he thought. And he was hoping that the assembly would narrow it down to a few ideas if they had, to even summarize this more, to give them ideas to research them to see if it was positive or negative for the borough, or, so Steve, you could explain it better probably. If you
You
wish.
said well, which is, there's a lot of information here, but there's not a lot of detail on each of these individual ideas. So clearly, if the Assembly wants us to research the pros and cons and the cost on every one of these, we can do that, but that's a really great job. I was hoping for, a little more targeted approach. If there's, 4 or 5 that the Assembly want us to vet and gather more information on, we can do that and bring that back and just kind of work through the list. But not doing that, in other words, if we don't go through every one of these and do that vetting process, I don't know that I can tell you which of these would be good or bad. We didn't take it that far.
Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not whether or not they're good or bad. It's just, the community has brought forward a bunch of suggestions that, I think we should kind of, originally we kind of thought we were going to have a work session to kind of go over line by line if we thought they were good, or we thought they were, trying to sort out if there was some type of, consensus at the Assembly level. It seems odd to me to push the budget out the door and have a bunch of suggestions from the community that we're not including in that budget process. I don't know if we want to, I can't use the word work session, but have some type of Assembly meeting that we can go through these and see if there's any, if the Assembly wants to get behind them. If we don't want to get behind them, then let's not spend too much time dealing with them. But if there are some interesting things, like if we're going to start collecting garbage based on a weight system, just different things outside the box for the community, this is the time to do it. I don't want to do it in July, and August, September after the budget's out the door. I'm just trying to sort out, the community is going to ask us, what did you guys do with my 3 nights that I spent up in the Assembly chambers putting some of my suggestions up there, and you're going to say, yeah, those are really good, but we're moving past that right now. I just want to make sure the public has a chance to know that we're at least taking them seriously. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Member Castro?
Mayor Mucci, yeah, I understand exactly kind of what you're getting at here, and I think that is a great idea. Nobody likes to put forth effort to see it all go down the toilet. The idea about garbage based on weight instead of volume, or besides just returns. 4 deliveries of trash a month. That seems like a good idea, but it might be a good idea to vet that with some folks beforehand. I like a lot of these things about recycling as well. I think that it'd be a great idea to be able to have some knowledge about the amount of glass that's taken out of the waste stream and the cost-benefit analysis on that. That'd be an interesting source to be able to maybe give to people to help encourage folks to recycle glass or to throw it into a different container than their trash. A lot of these are kind of they're really good ideas, but I think that we need to kind of move them a step forward. Perhaps it'd be a good idea for us to, if we feel so compelled, to take 3 of these and then bring them to an Assembly meeting instead of having to go through 9 pages of this list. And then maybe we'd have a little bit more meat to be able to talk about.
Mr. Wilson?
I think along that same vein, I think it's our responsibility as an Assembly to look at this now. We should probably go through this summer and pick out 5 items that we ourselves think are important to us, and then bring those 5 items and put them on a piece of paper, and then let's just see how many of them kind of coincide with each other. Maybe we hit on a couple of, all of us, think that this one's important. That's one that we can look at, and then kind of narrow it down to about 3, like Steve says, and I think that's how we can do that. So why don't we just, make that a point for us this winter or this summer to go over these things, and then put down 5 in priority, how we think we'd like to see them put out, and then let Steve and Debbie compile those 5 and see how many of those kind of pair up.
Any other discussion? Any other members? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So is that something you would like to see done between now and when the budget is passed?
For next budget cycle. I mean, things happen slowly in town, you know, so there's a lot of stuff that we need.
Okay, let's get to be recognized from the chair, so we're not having a floor, please. Member Mucci.
No, I understand that, but, you know, the folks that came to the meeting this winter, so nothing's gonna, you know, we'll go through these suggestions, but I guess only answer to them that we'll be bringing up in the 2019 budget cycle. Because several people wanted to have a community forum for the 2018 budget cycle. And so now we're just going to kick this can down the street for a bit and have it for the 2019 budget cycle.
This is actually, we're talking about fiscal year 2019 budget. But I don't think we will, I wasn't of the impression that we were going to try to get this vetted. I know we're a little bit behind on having the meeting to discuss these items, but I didn't know, or I can't recall at any point that we said we were going to have this vetted and toned down, or whatever you want to call it, or, you know, pick the ones we liked and present it for the 2019 budget. I can't recall that. See, the finance director has her hand up.
Well, I just wanted to say, even if, when you approve this budget in 3 readings, you can still change it. The Assembly can change it at any time. You just have to do a supplemental budget. We've had 3 of them this fiscal year alone. So it's not like you have to wait until fiscal year 2020 to make a big change.
Good point, thank you. Member Statton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, we've had this document for a while. I actually feel like I've got a reasonable understanding of this thing. And like, for myself, I think the things I've taken real interest in here, actually, they're not budgetary things. Member Castro touched on the idea of how to lower the amount of glass in our waste stream. That's in a way, you know, I think I don't need the budgetary process for that. I can sit down with Carl, Chris, et cetera, and think of different ways we can, you know, reduce that. And Mayor Ricci, if I may, were any of them that had jumped out at you that you wanted to speak to in particular, or are you just speaking in generalities? Sorry to put you on the spot. You don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Member Ricci.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. No, just, you know, there were some very interesting proposals about different ways to deal with garbage and recycling stuff. I mean, all the suggestions have merit.
Absolutely.
For discussion. And that's kind of what I think we should be doing. We should be kind of discussing how they fit with the borough. You know, if they don't fit with the borough, then let's move past that stuff and go to the next one. But I mean, there's a bunch of stuff on here that needs some discussion about if we think, as an assembly, as a governing body, that we need to have city staff look at them and kind of see if they work for us. If they don't work, then kick them out the door and deal with it.
Well, like the clerk said, you know, we could always do a supplemental budget later if between now and whatever date the Assembly comes up with some ideas and wants to bring them forward for, I would think it would be good for the administration to look at the ones we pick, if we do pick any, and vet them a little farther so we have some research. I personally don't have the time to sit and look at every one of them, research and try to analyze whether it's cost effective or not, and I probably don't have the wherewithal to do it anyway. But, so it'd be nice to maybe go about it that way, or just my opinion. Any other discussion on this? So I guess this was, we're not going to take any action on this, I guess, if there's no specific proposals on what we want to try to implement in the budget. Am I just reading that right? Member Ricci.
So, Mr. Mayor, you know, it was moved and seconded. Do we need to table this, or we need to, what would be the best?
What's your opinion, Debbie?
Well, we do have a motion on the floor, and the motion was to discuss the ideas? Is that what the motion was?
Yes. Yes, it did, yes. Yeah,
and that has taken place. Do you guys want to, like, come to a consensus about what you're going to do in the future, and we'll call it good? Are you going to do as Member Woolheater suggested and look at it over the summer, bring a few together, and we'll talk about it in the fall and see if we have a few to research, or what do you think?
I think at this point, if we took no action, maybe we have to take action since there's a motion and a second on the floor. wait to see if an assembly member comes forward with a list of 3, 4, 5, whatever the number may be, and present it at a meeting as an action item, and then if we vote on it, have the staff vet those, whatever the number may be. I don't know, that's just my thought out of this conversation. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we're going to, I don't think one member should bring a list together. I think the assembly should go through that list and maybe mark 1, 2, or 3 on, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 on issues that they think are important, that we should at least talk about at the assembly level. If you think, I can't remember what they are now, but if you think getting your garbage picked up once a month or once every 2 weeks is a good thing, then come prepared to tell us why you think that's a good thing. And then once we come up with a collated list from the assembly that we can kick out to the city staff, they can tell us eventually if that's going to work or not work. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the number one idea. I'm looking for 5 or 6 ideas that we can kind of sort out, chew on here, and try and get us to a better place. And, the community members that came forward and spent time here, we need to pay attention to that stuff because they spent time here, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Member Strand?
I agree with Member Kurt that we should study it over the summer. All these ideas were important enough for someone to come and list them. So I think that it would be cavalier for us to do away with all of them or choose only 5, winding up with 3 that are important. So I think we should study it with the intent to actually do something about it.
Member Steinberger? Member Strand?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that case, I guess I would throw out there for the assembly that we revisit this issue the first meeting in September and have each of us bring in, I'll just pick a number, 3 issues that we feel are important to us. So in theory, with 7 of us, on the off chance they're all different, that's 21 ideas, and we can winnow it down from there. I don't know if the assembly is amenable to something like that, but I feel comfortable laying that out there for us. Or I should say, since about this out, Member Mucci, would that suffice for you?
You bet. Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci?
That'd be fine.
Okay, so we could take that as an amendment in a second, and we'll vote on that. Does that make sense to the assembly?
Yes.
Does everybody understand what we're doing? Okay. Is there a report card if we don't get our 3 turned in? or
So
just kinda
basically,
curious?
we are postponing this agenda item until the first meeting in September, correct?
Well, we're going to come back with ideas. We're going to vote to see if we want to come up with a list by each assembly member to...
Yep, I noted 3 ideas from each assembly member.
3 ideas, thank you.
Yeah.
So do we all understand what we're voting on? Okay, clerk call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, that motion as amended passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is third and final reading, I believe, isn't it, Clerk Thompson, for ordinance 2018-12?
Well, let's see. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is the third and final.
This is an ordinance amending and updating Title 16 of the Municipal Code, Chapter 1604, entitled Definitions, 1612, entitled Acquisition and Disposal of Borough-Owned Lands, and 1616, entitled Tidelands, adding provisions for land exchange and updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Discussion. Clerk call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2018-12 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. Next item on the agenda C is ordinance 2018-14, and I believe this would be in its
First reading.
Yeah, it
Second
failed
try
in
for
its
the first reading.
Yeah, it's a second first reading. And this is an ordinance adopting the budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second. Motion's been made by Member Strand. Was that Member Mucci that seconded that?
Yes, sir.
Seconded by Member Mucci for the record. Discussion. Member Morrell.
I would like some explanation on the proposed $2,000 bonus for department heads, where it's coming out of, the purpose behind it, and whatever else that goes along with that.
Who would be the best to explain this, Member Geisler, your manager? Thank you, Steve.
I would be like, I'll back up a little bit. Sorry, this will get a little bit long-winded. First, and maybe the most important thing, is the borough does not do currently any kind of cost of living increases for any employees. That includes the folks you heard here tonight, as well as department heads. What we do is we've created kind of a matrix where we pick a group of cities, some smaller, some larger, and we compare ourselves to those cities. And we try to do that in as many positions as we can, and we do it with department heads pretty much every budget year, sometimes every other budget year, and we do it for our employees during the negotiation process. So again, we pull positions, we compare job descriptions, and we say, what does that position pay? And we look at those averages, and then we say, what do we pay? And we look at entry-level positions, step C, which is middle, and then what do we pay later on? We also look at benefits and a few other things, but to some of the morals, I'll try to stick to just the salary piece. So every year we put in an amount of money that is either by contract or, in the case of the department heads, what we think is kind of a placeholder, for lack of a better word. As an example, for benefits this year, we put in a 15% increase in cost across the board for all of our benefits, because often we don't know what that number is until we're through the budget process. This year we're getting some feedback that it might just be 10%, 9%. So we'll know that for sure here shortly, and then we'll come back and adjust that if need be to get the right number. This year what I did is I put in $2,000 per department head, and we've called it a bonus. It's not really what it is. It's basically, if it would go through, it would be in replacement of actually a salary increase. The reason we would do that would be so that it's not cumulative, so one-time payment kind of thing, so that next year, if we can't do anything, we're not adding on to a budget problem. So did put in $2,000 each. That's clearly not real accurate, because when we do our comparisons, and we're pretty much done with that, not every department head is out of whack. Some are actually more out of whack than others, and we have a matrix, a spreadsheet, I think, that I shared with the whole assembly, that showed where we look like we're underpaying, where we look like we're okay. And again, we don't really finalize that until the entire budget process, because we don't know if there's other issues in the budget that is going to come up when the assembly goes through it. We want us to add things, take away things, and it changes those numbers. So the 2,000 was a placeholder. I also, in the email I sent to all of you at the table, it showed what I would recommend if we actually did salary, what you call traditional salary merit increases. That would actually come out to be cheaper than the $2,000 per employee per department head that I budgeted. So again, that's how we do it. We put in a placeholder until we can get further information, and we were still waiting for a couple of cities when we put the original budget together. So again, it's up to you. I think you heard John say, and we've echoed it. Despite what you heard tonight, John's one of the employees' biggest advocates, in the sense that the last couple of contracts we have come in with very, very little when it comes to raises for the employees. our department heads continue to fall behind even with the raises that they've got, in some cases substantial raises. We're falling behind what other cities are paying for those similar positions. We can probably get away with that for a while, but then we'll start losing people, and both at the employee level as well as department level. So it is a focus of mine. We do what we can in negotiation, and that's based on what the assembly, and then I try to budget it on the department head side when we look at, what the comparable cities are doing for us, and how we compare. Roundabout answer, and I don't know if I ever.
Then you do a follow-up, Member Borough? Or do you have any more questions?
Not at this time.
Any other discussion on the topic? So, it's in the budget right now, $2,000.
Correct.
Per department head.
Per department head, correct.
So if we come out through the process and we find out what the insurance is going to cost or benefits or whatever, and it's $1,000, just for a number, do the department heads actually get the $1,000? Do they get the full $2,000, or is this just, like you say, a budget in case we need it? If their expenses per employee, department head specific, in this case, go up? Or do they get a $2,000 bonus? If we
Depends on
vote
how
on it,
the assembly wants. Sorry, my apologies.
if we vote on it as is, budgeted right now, will every department head get a $2,000 bonus regardless of their cost of insurance going up or what,
No. So to answer your question, no. What I would prefer to give them traditional merit raises rather than a one-time payment. Those one-time payments are beneficial for future budgets, so that's the reason I tried to put it in there, was where we put it in once, we pay it once, we don't have to pay it again next year. If you raise the department head salaries, then you do. That becomes a compounding effect. There are budget years where the assembly has not dealt with this, and it's fallen on me, and we've given raises, we budget for it and give raises, and sometimes they're different for other employees, and sometimes they're the same across the board. A lot depends on how we do those comparables and what we see. In this case, the assembly can ask me to bring something back when we finish up the budget and we see if we've got money or not, and say, you can take it out, you can leave it in there, and say, Steve, come back with a more specific request by employee, or we can do a one-time payment. I mean, you've heard my logic behind that. It really, in that email that I sent out to all of you, it's very clear that we're falling behind with certain department heads. And that's, again, we can probably, if the assembly wants to zero it out this year, we'll support it, we'll do what we can, but there's long-term issues with that if we keep doing this and not keep up, just like with the employees. Department heads, it's probably been a little bit more regular for them, but like I said in my original email, when I got here in 2011, we had several department heads that were a long ways away from being paid equitably for the jobs they were doing. And we went through a couple of years where I split it out over several years to try to get them up. The assembly at the time wasn't getting into those numbers, and that was left to me to do. So, to answer your question, Mayor, it depends on what the assembly wants to do. I mean, you can do it like, let me do it, or you can say, no, you want more control over the specifics of how we pay the department heads, and I can make that happening, turn the information over to you, and you guys can come up with recommendations.
Member Walter?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, when was the last time we gave him a one-time bonus, in my mind?
2 years ago, 2016.
2016, and what was that amount?
It was either 1,000 or 1,500.
1,500.
Okay. But thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so this last year, all the department has got a 4% raise?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was discussed during the budget process and
So
approved by the assembly.
Any other discussion on Member Stanton Gregory and then Nancy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. I mentioned this last Monday, but I think it bears repeating. I think department heads and Jody did a very sound job on this conservative budget. There are many reductions in many areas. I encourage any member of the public to take a peek at this very, very dry document that it is. But you will find that nobody was immune from having to tighten their belt. And I know that it's not easy because we all like lots of different services because it makes this town what it is. And I think Jody needs to be recognized for the efforts put in to make it hurt less. So I appreciate that, Jody.
Member Strand?
Just for clarification, even with this $2,000 bonus and the last $1,000 or $1,500 bonus, they're still lagging behind other communities?
Certain positions, yes. Not, in some cases, it's more than 2,000. In some cases, it's less than 2,000. In some cases, we're right on track, and we don't have to change anything. We don't have to give a $2,000 or $1,000 or anything at all. It's that, again, go back to the email I sent out trying to explain that. Every department head position is slightly different. It's also slightly different when we do our comparables because, an example is, a city that has a harbor master, but they don't have 3 harbors. They've got one smaller one. So do we want to compare us to them? That's part of what we do when we go to look at this. The same issue with look at Jody's position here. It's more complex than the finance director in Haynes. Yet we use Haynes as one of our comparables. The challenge is there's not a bunch of cities identical to Petersburg that have exactly what we have. So that's why we use averages. We look at 5 other cities, 2 of them are bigger, and we use 6. 4 smaller, 2 bigger. And we take the averages, and we try to match job for job. We didn't do public works this year because, number 1, it's really hard. Number 2, public works director got a nice raise. We didn't do the utility director. We have a problem every year doing this with Sheila and the Manor because very few communities have a assisted living and elderly housing facility, so we kind of talk Pioneer Home and try to get information out of some private sector stuff, but it's really difficult. Again, with the 2,000, if we did across the board and gave every employee 2,000, then some employees would be getting more than they deserve according to the matrix, and some would not be getting enough. So, that's a very blunt sword to use to try to fix this problem. It's better to be more specific.
Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The $2,000 or $1,500 for a department head, that sounds, I guess okay, but for me, it should be a needs-based thing or a merit-based thing. Mm-hmm. And I think they should be feeling the same pinch that the rest of the employees in the community are feeling with our contract negotiations. I don't want to be saying that we're giving department heads the blank, whatever, 2,000, unless it's a merit-based increase based on their job performance. Because it's not going to do anything for morale for PMA or IBEW if we give the department heads a bump, and we're not being consistent with the people on the ground who the community is seeing every day. And that bothers me a bit.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor.
Through the mayor, and I can speak to that. We treat both groups the same way at the entry-level part of it, meaning we take jobs. We do this for PMEA every year. We just finished it with IBW, and we take those positions and we go and talk to those communities and we say, what are you paying for a sanitation driver? What are you paying for somebody that works in water wastewater? What are you paying for a police officer? And we take those averages and then we compare those to what we're currently paying, just like we do for department heads. So the analysis we do is absolutely no different. Well, it is slightly different. Because department heads, we know their jobs really, really well, and they're more alike like their peers in other communities, it's probably in some ways easier for us to make those comparisons than it is, and there's fewer of them. So we got all these positions in the borough, lots of different titles, and that process takes a tremendous amount of time. So we don't do all 50 positions. We take select groups out of that, and then we look for problems. This year, for example, in PMEA, we spotted 2 real problems. One was the RAs that we felt were significantly underpaid for the job they were doing. The other was in the police department, where we were noticing some trends where we were, at the time, okay at the entry-level job, but as they were here longer, it wasn't going up faster. So at the kind of 10 to 15-year period, we were paying a lot less than our peers were. So back to your question, you don't want us to treat department heads different than our line employees. At the base level, we're not. We're doing the same exact comparison. We're doing performance. The difference is in the unions, we're not seeing this across the board that pays out of whack. Now, I'm going to back up and say we've been given 1 or 2% raises for some time to employees. That's not keeping up with cost of living, and it's definitely not keeping up with what we had to do with benefits. That being said, we're not seeing our comparables changing much either. So that's where what we're seeing on the department head side is we are seeing a difference. We're seeing other communities paying more for some of these positions than we are. And we're not seeing, at least when we started negotiations, we weren't seeing the same thing for the PMEA positions, and we saw the same over in IBEW. It has nothing to do with how good a job they're doing. It has to do with basic comparable information. That's how we're doing this. We're not going, wow, you're a really good employee, so we want to give you a raise. We're actually just looking at saying, what's your position paying in another community? So we are treating them the same. Just the results are coming back different.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was the explanation I was looking for. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So any other discussion on the ordinance 2018-14, the fiscal year 2019 budget?
So, Mr. Mayor, so is this the time to add amendments to the budget?
It would be wonderful to
Yes,
get
it
this
is.
tonight.
But Mr. Walter had.
Well, I've been thinking about this, I know we use comparables for other communities and things like that, but other communities aren't Petersburg. We have a unique community here. We have a community that's safe. We have a community where you can give your child a $10 bill and they can hold it in their hand, go down to the store and buy their half a gallon of milk, and get home without being abducted or killed, I mean, they may not have that opportunity in other communities. That's something that we have to think about, when we think about trying to keep up with the Joneses in a sense. We have limited, I think we have to look at what our resources are here for being able to maintain and keep people here. If we don't have the resources in our community to keep up with other communities, well then, maybe it's time for these people to look at another community. I'm not saying that I don't value these people, because I do value them, but I mean, is there other ways that we can show our appreciation to them? I mean, can we talk about maybe adding 2 days of day off, paid days off, which is no physical, which is no cost to us. It's just something that we'd do, so maybe department heads get 4 days off, and maybe our city employees will get 2 days off, with paid. That kind of a thing, and so it's not coming out of our pockets. It's just, we just give them 2 days paid off, extra, without going into negotiation. I mean, just show some kind of appreciation that we do like what they do. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like if we're going to try to keep placating them with throwing money at them, at some point, the people that are paying their wages are going to get really resentful, and I'm starting to hear, feedback a little bit from people, and so I'm just trying to figure out how can we play this so everybody feels kind of warm and fuzzy without feeling as though we're taking advantage of them, or we don't appreciate them. I mean, I have to say myself, I do appreciate everybody that works for the city, no matter what position they're in, because, I mean, without them, we wouldn't be where we are. So I'm just voicing kind of a sort of a sentiment that I'm sort of hearing. So.
Through the mayor. You mentioned time off. I can tell you that I got here 6.5 years ago. The day I got here was the day that the Assembly, City Council at the time, approved the PMEA contract that folks had to live through. That was one of the biggest items, was taking away time off from the employees, including future department heads. The second contract did the same, and we've done the same at IB. So, I mean, that's entirely up to the Assembly, but our direction for the last few contracts was kind of the exact opposite, which was reduce PTO, not add to it. So, that being said, yes, I mean, we could do other things. I think reality is the pay is the easiest, but it does cost us when we send somebody home and say, hey, you don't have to be at work today. They're not working at that point. But I wanted, for the benefit of people listening as well as the Assembly, if you hadn't had a chance to look at it, the cities we compare ourselves to for both PMEA and the department heads are Petersburg, Haines, Cordova, Palmer, Wrangell, Seward, and Kenai. On the Kenai one, we used to use Homer, but we can't seem to get good information. You'll notice, I mean, 4 of those, Haines, Cordova, Wrangell, and Seward, are all, on a percentage basis, significantly smaller than Petersburg. And Palmer and Kenai are bigger, but both fall into a borough and end up, the jobs that they have aren't quite the same, and in some ways less complicated, particularly in places like finance. So, just using Wrangell as an example, the average pay, we pay our community development director $36.72 an hour. It's an hourly number. Wrangell's paying $41.70. So, this becomes the challenge, Member Whiter and the rest of it, is we can do other things. But at a certain point, money talks, and that goes for the employees sitting in this room, as well as the Assembly, the department heads in the back of the room. And I can't speak for at what point will we start losing people if we don't pay them enough. But I mean, again, it's one of those. It's not an exact science. I tried to make that very clear when I wrote up. We adopted this to try to have some semblance of numbers to go along with how we're making these decisions. We can definitely go a different direction. If the Assembly, wants to freeze salaries, we can go that way.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, but and I don't know if it's a question on some of the will here, but we just can't. We're not at the point where we can unilaterally give our city employees 2 days off. I mean, that's like a budget negotiating strategy that we have to deal with. And if that's something we want to look at, we can certainly do that in the executive session. But right now, that's not part of the discussion. I mean, and that's kind of, that sounds good, but there's a bigger process that goes with that statement. I mean, it'd be great to give city or borough employees time off with pay, but that's kind of not where we are with our union negotiations. And if that's something we want to talk about later on tonight in the executive session, we certainly can, but I think we're not doing city employees or department heads any favors by saying, yeah, we can give a couple days off. Go.
Okay, Member Borough, did you have a...
Yeah, I did. I understand what the manager is saying. However, with department heads, from what I've seen, I mean, they got 4% last year. They got a $1,500 bonus the year before. They got 2%, 2.5%, 4%, a lot in 2000. I mean, I feel like we've caught up. I feel like it's, we're at a point where we've been asked to cut expenses, and I don't see anything wrong with not giving it out. I mean, I don't see the rest of the employees receiving the same as a 2 to 3% bonus a year, so that's where I'm at.
Member Wall.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. At some point, I just want to clarify what I said. I'm not looking to negotiate this 2 days off. I'm just throwing out ideas like it shows up in your Christmas stocking kind of a thing. I mean, just to show our appreciation. Instead of getting coal, or just, you know what I mean. I mean, so not in the union contract, not in anything like that. So I just wanted to just clarify that I'm not trying to negotiate 2 days off in lieu of, but I'm just saying, how else then, let me just throw this out to the Assembly if anybody wants to discuss this item, is how else can we show our appreciation without throwing money at them? We have an appreciation day or what, you know what I mean? I mean, it seems like this is kind of what they want to see. So I'm just saying, I'm just saying.
You're welcome to ask them.
No, go ahead. No. So if anybody wants to, any assembly member wants to see a change in the budget in any section, it'd probably be best to make a motion to do that and see if we get a second and discuss that instead of just back and forth. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is my amendment. I don't know, you can tell me what the best way to deal with this, but I'm just going to throw it all out there, and then you can tell me what the best way through the city clerk is to deal with amendment to the budget.
Okay. Is it kind of an item, or is there?
Yes, there's 2 items and one place to get the money.
Pardon me?
2 items and one place to maybe get the money from to help. So, Mr. Mayor, I would like to get to see what it would cost to have the library open on Sunday afternoon for 4 hours.
Actually, it would have to be in the form of an amendment possibly to do that?
That's what I'm trying to sort out.
Okay.
And I'd also like to see the museum budget restored to its original amount.
Clerk Thompson, if those were going to be amendments, do you feel they should be made one at a time?
It would be best probably if it was one at a time, because if someone agrees with part of it and doesn't agree with the other part,
Then they both fail.
Sure.
yes.
And so I'm just going to throw the rest, Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Yeah.
So, since we don't have a King Salmon Derby coming on this year, I'm suggesting that we possibly take the funds from the Chamber of Commerce and reduce their contribution that the city was going to give to the city because they have $109,000 in their savings account, and there's a couple other, between the museum and the library. I'd like to see those things funded.
So what I would say, Member Mucci, is to make your first motion that the library stay open on Sunday for 4 hours, Sunday afternoon, and pay for the cost of that using funds from the Chamber of Commerce contribution from the borough. So that would be like amendment number 1.
Mr. Mayor, before we get there, I'm not quite sure, the amount that's going to be for those 2 part-time employees to work. So I haven't quite sorted out the funding mechanism, but I'm just trying to sort out the mechanics of having it open for 4 hours. Mr. Mayor. So would you like that in the motion first?
I feel you should make a motion to amend an individual part of the budget, and then and maybe in the motion suggest where you're going to pay for it, and it's kind of voting on 2 things, and then discuss that amongst the assembly members.
Sure.
If you get a second.
Yeah, you bet.
So what would your first amendment motion be?
To have the library open on Sunday afternoons for 4 hours.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a second?
I will second for the sake of discussion.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second been made. The motion was made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Greger to keep the library open on Sundays for 4 hours.
Yep. Mr. Mayor?
Get discussion?
Yep, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the library is not open on Sundays. Wandering around town, people, Saturday and Sunday are important to folks for their days off, and I've heard from folks who want to see the library open for a few hours on Sunday. If you're driving back and forth to the airport, you'll see people up in the parking lot of the library dealing with Wi-Fi that the library has going on when the library is closed. I think it's a big part of the community. It's a big part of the visitor industry in town. And I keep hearing from the families in town that a short time on Sunday afternoon they'd appreciate it. I'm not sure if we have consensus up here, but this is the time of year for me to kind of throw stuff out there to see if it sticks to the wall. So that's something I'm looking for. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the amendment to Member Castro?
Yeah, sure. I see Tara in the back. I'm wondering what type of a challenge this might bring with an additional 4 hours on Sunday, or if it would at all. Would this be something that you see as being possible?
Well, Assemblyman Mucci brought this idea to the library board, I think it was just this past winter. And so we did look at it quite thoroughly in terms of logistics and cost. And it would require the creation of 2 part-time positions to cover 4 hours on Sunday. And it would also require extra janitorial and utilities costs. And I estimate it would be at a minimum about $40,000 a year to add that additional service. And so that's about a 10% increase to the library's budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Member Stanton-Krieger?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Tara, for putting some numbers to that. I mean, of course, I agree with Member Mucci. I'm a person with little kids. I'd love to go to the library on Sunday. I admit it, I love being down there. It's great facility. That said, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around hiring 2 new part-time employees at this point. Especially because, for those of you listening at home and have looked at the community services budget, there's an across-the-board 5% reduction on that. And if I had my way, none of them would take any reduction. They're all very critical services. That said, 5% was pretty even-handed, and I feel like I'd be remiss to take from one to fund the other. I'd feel a little too discriminatory for my blood at this point, so I can't support it at this time, despite my wanting for that at the library.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes?
Mark?
No.
Brandy?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Kurt?
No.
Eric?
No.
Jay?
No.
Okay, the amendment to keep the library open on Sunday fails with a 6-1 vote. Member Mucci in favor. Is there any other amendments? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see the museum funded to the full request that they asked for in the original budget preparation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion's been made by Member Mucci to fully fund the museum for fiscal year 2019, and a second by Member Stanton-Greger. Is there a dollar amount?
That's an increase of $2,100.
$2,100?
Mm-hmm.
And what would that bring the total up to?
For the museum, it'd be, bring it up to $42,000.
Okay.
And can I just ask where you would like that funding from? Would it be the general fund, or would it be the transit room tax fund where the chamber is being paid out of?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see it come out of the transit room fund that funds the Chamber of Commerce.
Any other discussion on this amendment to fund the library or the museum to $42,000, $2,100 increase, and take it from the transient room tax? Member Strand.
I'm, of course, very fond of the museum, and I would love to see it, the funding restored to its original, the amount it usually has been getting for the last couple of years, and especially if there's money in the TRT fund, that it come from.
Okay. Any other discussion on this amendment? Member Roll.
I have a question for Jody. If it was to come from the transient room tax fund, it would have to cut into someone else's. Is that?
No, I estimate that there's probably an excess of about $5,000 in that fund if we keep the chamber's funding the same, and it's not changed from that fund. They're the only ones being funded from the transit room tax fund this year.
We have about a $5,000.
Mm-hmm. So there'd leave another, around $2,000 to $3,000. It's hard to tell. You can't just guess what transit room tax receipts are going to come in at the summer. I mean, I'm optimistic that, but you never know.
Looks like we're going to have a lot of travelers. Member Castro?
Yeah, and being as that we have the money available and it's not actually taking it out of anybody else's budget, I feel that it'd be a benefit to the community. I mean, this is something that, as Kathy Reamer ended up kind of showcasing a little while ago about, the amount of traffic that comes through there, it's actually pretty phenomenal for a small little facility like that. And I think that this would be a good use of $2,000.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Member Stanton-Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, $2,100 is not much for the museum. It's, in actuality, it's 5% of their budget, correct, Jody?
Yes.
And just to be a bit redundant, all other aspects of the community service budget have taken a 5% reduction. For some organizations, it's more. Theirs is the lowest. I'm wrestling with how to choose one over the other. I could talk myself into all of them being, restoring at 5%. But again, I'd feel at that point I'm being discriminatory in budget policy, and for myself, I can't do it, so I won't be voting for that.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Member Strand?
Well, and after hearing Member Stanton-Gregor verbalize it like that, I'm thinking I'm going to have to agree with him. It would be discriminatory. So even if it didn't take money away from some other, ultimately it does take money from someone. If we need the $5,000 still in the TRT money for a future need unknown at this time, then perhaps it just should stay there.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Member Miucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's probably all kinds of unknown needs around the community, but, the museum is, is part of our history here, and it's not a lot of money. It's just one of those things where we all take our families up there throughout the year to show them what Petersburg was like 40, 50, or 100 years ago, and $2,100 is, in the grand scheme of things, it's part of our heritage here. And I don't, I know there's going to be unforeseen costs, all kinds of different things throughout the future, but for the museum, I think it's important for the community.
Member Walter?
Just for clarification, the $2,100 that they weren't going to receive this year, did that reduce the number of hours that they were going to have at the museum? Is there anybody here that can answer that?
Member Strand, right now? She's raising her hand.
The possibility is always there. We're already closed for at least 1 month in the winter, if not 2. Mm-hmm. So with shrinking resources, not just from here, but from everywhere, there is a possibility that and maybe not daily, but in the winter.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Castro?
Well, I totally appreciate Mr. Stanton-Gregor's comments and sentiments. However, I feel that the purpose of the transit room tax is to be able, transit room tax is to be able to provide resources for our out-of-state residents or guests, and to try to increase or encourage new visitors. And I think that us having an open resource such as the library or the museum, this is it's a benefit for the community, and I'll be voting for this.
Okay. Any other discussion on this amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Kurt?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment to give $2,100 more to the museum has failed. Now we're back to the main motion. That's to adopt the budget for the fiscal year 2019, unless there's any more amendments. Is there any more amendments this evening? We have 2 more readings and a public hearing coming up, so we have more opportunity. Will the clerk call the roll on the budget as proposed?
Yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Nancy? Yes. Kurt?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, the first reading of our budget fiscal year 2019 has passed. Next item on the agenda is item 18, or item D, 18-175, unilateral implementation of Borough's last, best, and final offer with the Petersburg Municipal Employees Association with PMEA. And member Borough, I think, is asking to recuse herself.
Yes, I am.
So, I don't, let's get a motion and a second on the floor, please. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask the clerk a question. It's fine if member Morrell stays in the room, or she just can't discuss or vote, correct?
Correct.
All right, so, discussion. So I have one question, and I forgot the gentleman's name that spoke from
Joel.
APA. So maybe you could answer this question, Steve. What has been filed by is that the negotiating team?
Sure. I sent that around recently, but it's basically a charge of unfair labor practices. It's handled in an administrative fashion by the state. The APA, PMEA group has filed their documents. The borough will then in turn file our side of the story, so to speak, and then it'll go in front of an administrative hearing officer who will make a decision on whether PMEA is correct or whether the borough is correct. And I think in your packets is a letter from your negotiator, John Hogue, on his take on that whole, system. What's our deadline? 25th to have the borough's case, if you want to call it, to the hearing officer.
Oh, May.
Correct.
Any other discussion? Member State Greger, did you?
No, not yet. I'm still pondering. Someone else can go ahead.
Any other discussion? Member State Greger?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several thoughts. One is thank you to the people who spoke. The employees came in today. Something I'm wrestling with right now is this role, trying to gain as much information as I can. I know it was not your intention to throw a curveball at myself personally today, but hearing you guys speak so strongly in regards to your dealings with our negotiator, it throws me off. From a personal thinking point of view, like I feel like I would have had this, I would have loved to have had this information sometime. I don't know if you couldn't have said anything before, but of course I want the employees to be treated fairly by our negotiator. And if you guys are speaking and saying very clearly and in no uncertain terms, you didn't feel it was professional. So, wrestling with that and how to move forward at this point in this discussion period, because that is new information to me at this point.
I have another, are you done?
I am done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have a question for the manager or the clerk or whoever could answer. So if we do not vote to implement this last best offer, last best and final offer, what's the next steps?
Not sure. I think we'll likely would wait until the hearing officer makes her decision before anything was going to be done regardless, but
And then if anything, I guess back to the negotiating table, right?
yeah, potentially. I don't want to speak out of turn. I mean, you heard from some of the union membership that was involved in this. I can tell you I've heard the other side of it, and I think even in his letter, Mr. Hogue says the same thing, that there was unfair labor practices going on by APA and PMEA. So I'm not trying to judge that. That's what a hearing officer will help us do. But there's always another side to the story. It's everything from you heard pieces and parts. I mean, to my knowledge, we've never received a counteroffer from PMEA to anything different than their original offer that came in, which was fairly substantial for the employees, and I get it why they would want it. So, again, this is a very, back and forth type thing. I honestly was not in the room. I mean, the assembly had John Hogue do this. I think Debbie and Mindy were both in there at various times, but not all the time. And, John has a whole other side of this story that says, that defends the borough and the actions the assembly took and said, here's what you can offer. So if the assembly doesn't approve this, I think we'd step back and we'd find out what the next step is. The assembly would likely need to decide if you want me or someone else to negotiate if it goes back to the table. I'm not sure John would want to do that if it came to that. And I'm not sure we'd want to do anything until the hearing officer decides.
Member Strand.
Are we going to vote on this, or are we going to go into executive session and discuss it?
We're going to vote on this. This is PMEA. The executive session is about IBEW.
Oh, okay.
Later in the meeting, so. Member Castro?
Well, based off of, a lot of these reputable people, good folks, with these claims and allegations that, again, I had not, just getting wind of, I feel most comfortable probably waiting until we ended up hearing from a hearing officer and getting some information back regarding both sides of the debate.
Any other discussion on this? Member Miucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just I guess a question to Assemblymember Castro. So will you be voting against this?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm kind of wondering which way to vote. It seems like if we don't approve this last best offer, then we wait to hear from the hearing officer. And is their word final? Or can the borough appeal that decision from the hearing officer? Or not that I personally want to drag this out any longer. I want it to be as fair for all the parties involved as possible.
I apologize, I don't know the answer to that. I would have to read statute.
Okay.
But we could find out. We can learn. I'll have to let you know.
Remember,
You can go first.
Well, I was going to say in that light, could we just table this until the next assembly meeting, until we get that information?
Yes, we could certainly.
Member Stanton.
So when is that hearing, Clerk?
It has not been set yet. The date of the hearing has not yet been set.
So, go ahead, Mr.
What's the deadline for is there a deadline, date, drop dead date where we have to have a contract? I mean,
No.
we've gone years without a contract, correct?
Correct.
Member Stanton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess it's a question for the clerk, if I may.
Sure.
If, for the sake of argument,
Sorry, excuse me.
do what you got to do. You bet. No problem. So, for the sake of argument, let's say a motion is made to postpone this. What would be an appropriate amount of time to postpone it to,
Well, our lead negotiator.
if you can't help in that area? Sorry,
Our
go
lead
ahead.
negotiator is currently out of town and will not be back in town until the 22nd. So if you would like to speak with him, I would say it shouldn't be next week's meeting, it should be later. Possibly,
First meeting in June?
yes, or the second meeting in June. I don't know how long it will take for the hearing officer to decide to set up a hearing. I've never been through this before, so.
Yeah.
So one thing we could do is table this till a time certain and pick a meeting date. And since the borough's negotiator won't be here until after our next meeting, which is next Monday, the first meeting that would be available after that would be June 4th, if I'm reading the calendar correct.
Correct.
Member Stanton.
In that case, I would move to postpone this until the June 4th meeting. We'll go from there.
Is there a second? Member Bucci?
I don't know if I have a second, but this discussion, I mean, I'll second it for the matter of discussion.
Thank you.
So all I'm trying to sort out is that if we pass this and we want to hear from the negotiator, I'm just trying to sort out what the options are after that. You know, so that if we go with the hearing officer, are we bound by that, or do we have alternative courses to go?
That is the question that the clerk can't answer. I asked.
Yes, but I mean,
so.
can we sort that out?
Yes,
Yes.
I can find answers to those questions.
Member Stanton Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My logic was for picking the June 4th date. If we don't have any actionable or tangible information at that point, we can just postpone it again.
Absolutely.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, a motion's been made by Member Stanton Gregor and seconded by Member Bucci to postpone this or table it till a time certain, which is the June 4th meeting, and that will be a noon meeting. So we've had kind of discussion on that. Will clerk call the roll?
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy? Oh, sorry. Jay?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the vote on the unilateral implementation of the borough's last, best, and final offer with the Petersburg Municipal Employees Association has been postponed until the June 4th meeting. Well, I was going to bring something up, but I won't because it's not on the agenda. We're now going to...
Yep, good
Oh,
job.
the Harbor Board, E, yes, one more item.
I wrote it down, so I'm good.
So did I, but I just didn't read it. Okay, so if we're going to do this like we have in the past, it's by appointment of the mayor with approval of the assembly. And at the last meeting, there was only 4 of us here. There's been 4 people that have put their names in for this position. And this position, this person, whoever gets appointed, will possibly be involved in one meeting until the October 2018 election. And then there'll be, and I don't know how long the length of the term is to replace Mr. Banks. That's the position we're filling. But like the last meeting, I would like to, with approval of the assembly, appoint Joel Randrup to the Harbor Board for the remainder of 2018, until the October 2018 election.
Do you need a second?
Needs a motion.
Needs a motion? Yeah, I'll make a motion that we appoint Joel Randall.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Seeing none, is that all those in favor of this, Member Bucci?
Nope, that's fine. I was just curious what the next.
All those in favor of the appointment of Joel Randall to the Harbor Board, say aye. Aye. Or should we take, let's take a vote.
Yes.
Let's make it clear.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
No.
Okay, Mr. Randall will be appointed to the Harbor Board with the 4-3 support of the Assembly on the mayor's appointment until October election. So, seeing no other unfinished business, we will stop the meeting and we'll go into executive session. We need to, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session. Hang on 1 minute.
Mr. Mayor, I move
Yes.
to go into executive session to discuss the status and strategy with regards to ongoing collective bargaining with the IBEW union.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we're gonna, let's take a 5-minute break. Give us time to clear the room, and we'll go back into, thanks there.